It's like, oh, you're Chinese, I'm Chinese, great, let's hang out. First time I was racially called out, like a racial slur, and that was, I think, a big aha of like, oh, thought we were friends, told to go back to your country.
Thinking that you weren't American?
Exactly, yeah. You know, the perpetual foreigner. I was in the grocery store parking lot, racially motivated, swearing at me, having that moment where I wasn't sure if the person was subtle prejudice or racism that's there, that's inherent. That I asked my dad, like, if he had experienced any, you know, discrimination. And
hello and welcome to another episode of Cosmic Chats. We're here with Debbie Fan, an accomplished actress in Los Angeles, dog lover. She works at the rescues, but we're going to get in deep about how she visited her family heritage in Taiwan at 7 years old and came back to America speaking Mandarin. And as she's grown up, she found that she repressed certain beliefs of herself and discovered how she was viewed simply by the way she looks, and learned how she had her own prejudices towards being who she was. So how would you describe the taste of a banana to someone who's never had one?
You know, it's funny, I've heard you ask this question, and and now I'm like, I don't know. The taste, it's kind of mushy depending on where you find it in its ripeness. Texturally, it's you can do a lot of things with it. Like you make, you know, mash it up, you can freeze it, and then it tastes like ice cream. But when it gets more ripe, it tends to, I don't know, kind of have a rummy kind of smell to it. At least that's what it reminds me of. I don't know. It's really hard fruit to describe.
Fermented, sort of.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, which is what you want when you make banana bread. You want like as ripe as possible to get that flavor out.
What is the obsession with banana bread?
I don't know. I used to make it all the time as a kid, though. Like I haven't made it in forever, but yeah, we just loved it.
Is it an American thing? Because I didn't grow up making banana bread.
Oh, really? I guess so. Yeah, I think I don't know.
Did you go off the taste of it, or the banana bread?
I think it's the taste. Yeah, the taste, and then you can put the nuts in it, and you know, nothing like, I guess I don't eat it anymore, but like a nice sweet bread. You think it's healthy, but it's not really healthy.
No, it's pudding, isn't it?
Yeah, essentially.
It's sort of like bread pudding. I never liked bread pudding.
Oh yeah, I don't get that.
So when did you have your first perception change that you can remember in your life that altered how you viewed the world?
Yeah, probably not conscious of it until many years later, but when I was 6, 7, I got sent to Taiwan to go spend the summer with family, and my mom took me out there, and then she left. And so then I was in a foreign country, alone with, you know, aunts and uncles who I didn't really know, not really speaking the language. And I think that really affected me as I look back on it over the years, of like that fear of abandonment, or like that idea like, oh, I don't know, where's what happened? Yeah, I don't know.
Was it planned that she was going to go?
Yeah. So it was planned that I would go there for the summer, and you know, they do, you know, in culture they do that to you, so you can learn the language. And by the time I came back over the summer, I had forgotten English, which is kind of funny because I had to start school in 4 days. Yeah, so she was there with me. I don't know the exact timeline, but she was there with me for a couple weeks, and then she came back to get me, obviously. But as a kid, I don't think I fully realized, like, oh, my mom's not here.
And that was Mandarin.
Yeah, in Taiwan. So yeah, that was the summer in Taiwan. That's okay.
So you were there to become immersed in learning Mandarin, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And you successfully learnt Mandarin, and then you came back and you couldn't remember English. How did your family take that?
I think my sister was the most thrown off because I mean I learned really quickly. Like within a week, I think I had it back or something. But I just came back completely speaking Chinese. And so my sister, who's older than me, I think yeah, I think it threw her off the most.
Was that out of jealousy that she didn't know it, or just complete and utter shock that you were speaking a different language?
I think more shock, and that I didn't really, yeah, like that I'd forgotten English. I mean, it was just weird, right? Like what happened to my sister?
And have you now forgotten Mandarin?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I speak Chinglish, really my vocabulary is like a toddler. So I can get along. I can get out or get around if I have to go get groceries or something, I can speak. But if I turn on a news channel, which sometimes I'll try, like as I'm driving around the Chinese channel, I'm like, I don't know. No idea. It's all just gibberish.
And how did your parents deal with this?
I think like if I recall, it was kind of like, oh, no big deal. Like, oh, it'll come back. Yeah, like didn't really phase them too much.
Was there any sort of pride about the fact that you now are fluent for that age in Chinese?
I've never asked them that. I, I will ask if they even remember. I'm sure there was like, oh, good, she speaks English, or I mean Chinese, right? Like that's the whole point, like to keep culture going.
And did you still stay? Actually, the question is, did you become close with your relatives while you were there?
I did, yeah. So I had a cousin who was about the same age as me, and we played G Force before it was a thing in America, because the anime starts there.
Right.
Yeah, and then it didn't come to the States until many years later, and people were all into it. I was like, what is happening? Like this has been around. Like, yeah.
So did you find that you were then, did you disconnect over time with the family because you were dropping speaking Mandarin?
I think just distance. Yeah. Yeah, the relatives are so far, and even, yeah, I think just distance created kind of, we didn't talk anymore. Like she still lives in Taiwan.
That's very different than now, especially during COVID. Those who were not wanting to deal with apps or technology to talk to people across the world, it was a reason to drop communication. It's so far and really not so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you had that rebirth with that culture. What did you take from that culture that you carry with you now?
What a great question. I think, well, on that trip, I loved the food, I'll say. I mean, I still remember that. Being young, and loved all the food there in Taiwan. I don't know. I don't know if this is really answering the question, but there's just something with at least in observing my parents and the culture, like wherever you go, wherever there's Chinese people, it's like you have instant family. And there's no barrier to like kind of getting to know one another. And sometimes like growing up in America, like I can look at things, I was like, man, people are intrusive. Or not, that's not the right word, but like there's just no of that, like, oh, let's get to know each other. It's like, oh, you're Chinese, I'm Chinese, great, let's go. Let's hang out, And I think that's a product of just, if you're looking back on history, just like community. Like, where am I going to go find the people? You see the Chinatowns around and stuff, right? Like, where am I going to go find people who I can relate to?
Do you find that now if you go to Chinatown, you have a different experience?
Well, there's a difference, at least here in LA, and different Chinatowns, because there's a Chinatown where it's primarily a lot of Chinatowns speak Cantonese, which I don't speak. Whereas if you go to like the San Gabriel Valley, you're going to have more Mandarin speaking. So it's a different kind of immigrant experience, I think. But definitely anytime I go into areas where there's the culture, there's a sense of like, oh, belonging and like just kind of a home. I guess that feeling of just home.
Now, is that the feeling that emanates from you or from the people you interact with?
I think with me. Yeah. Yeah.
So they see what you visually look like before you even communicate. Do you even try to communicate in Mandarin?
I do. Yeah.
Okay, so you communicate. So then there's, even if they themselves are immigrants and lived in America for a long time, that effort that you make, then that creates that bond with a so-called stranger. And do you feel like you get different prices as a result?
That I'm not sure about that, but definitely I learned to haggle in different places that I go. You know, from yeah, like street vendors, markets, you know, this idea like I'm gonna get a good deal. How much can I?
Did you get that from being raised by your mum, or did you get that more when you were in Taiwan when you were younger and you were going around those markets and there are more places like that?
I think it was from my mom. It just, again, culturally, like going to places and just yeah, and then just whenever we would travel, like trying to get a good deal. And so I found that in myself at one point, and I remember being, I mean, it just becomes about the game. And I think at one point, I can't remember where I was at, but literally where I was like, I am haggling over like probably like 10 cents here, like, but it's like, oh, I can get that extra 10 cents off, and I had to put it in perspective, like, okay, let's remember what I'm haggling over here and who can use this 10 cents more than me,
Right, but that's almost that perception now. This was in America, right?
No, this was, I want to say, this actually may have been in China on a trip back to China.
But that was definitely that sort of the American perception of like, really, it's only 10 cents. However, in the culture, it's like that it's about the haggling and the relationship with the vendor and yourself supersedes necessarily 10 cents here or there.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. I mean, somebody always wins. If it's a win-win where they're like, okay, I'll throw this in because they need to get rid of that, then you feel it equates it, right? Okay. But it's a bonding, it's communing, doing this bartering, right? So my experience, not in China, but when I've been in Morocco or other countries where there is this, and they have it set up for Westerners where you can go to places where it's a set price, or you can go and enjoy the heckle or the haggle, really, as it were. And sometimes it's sit down, have a cup of tea. It's a form of like communing, and then we're going to discuss the deal, right? Which is very different from a Western approach, because the experience of being there or in that person's shop, or it's a whole community about, oh, this is this person, they can help me with this, or okay, here comes this person, they're very astute, I appreciate their knowledge of what I sell. And it's a deeper learning of someone. And the idea of it simply going to market like Jack and the Beanstalk, right? I mean, what exactly happened that he sold the cow for the beans? I mean, there must have been some profound spiritual exchange for him to say, all right.
Yeah.
Because then he had the adventure of his life. It could be like, what was missing out from Jack and the Beanstalk? Like, what really went down at that market that he thought it was a great deal? Because I don't think he was an idiot.
It's a subtext.
The subtext of Jack and the Beanstalk on Cosmic Chats. And so when you grew up Did you find, was there any other Chinese American families in your school?
In where I grew up, we had a family, like I grew up, there were four families. We were one of the four, and we were all in the same kind of neighborhood, and we would go to the same school. So there was, I would say there overall there was a handful, but there was a family of four that we would always take a summer trip together. And yeah, that was pretty much, I'd say, a handful of Chinese kids, families in the schools I went to.
Now, did you find that you all bonded together?
Yeah, I think so. We were definitely having the same, ABC, as we call it, American Born Chinese experience
Right,
at
right,
that
right.
time. Yeah. And
And
then
what was,
also being, there was also, on the parents end, like just some like comparison stuff too. So I think it was that like double-edged sword of like we're hanging out, but also like now we're being compared to each other in certain instances.
it was like almost recreating that community of that competition within your own micro family.
Yeah, in certain circumstances for sure. Yeah.
When did you become aware that you looked different in the school? Or were you prepped and told about it before you went to school?
I don't recall a conversation that was like you're different. I definitely, I want to say like fourth, fifth grade, maybe younger actually, having some awareness, but not really. I think having an awareness, but I was pretty, I mean, I was a kid, it wasn't like I was being bullied or anything, but as far as like the first time I was racially called out, like a racial slur, like it was sixth grade. And that was, I think, a big aha of like, oh, okay. I thought I thought we were friends. And then that was like a shift of like, oh, I guess there's a difference there. Or they see the difference. I think
And was
maybe
that based on visual or behavior?
visual. Yeah, racial slur. Yeah.
So then you disengaged from that friendship?
I think it was, well, it was like one of those, like, they were boys, so we were, I think it's not like we were like friends, but we were, I don't know, sixth grade. And so I think I was just a lot more self-conscious. I think that's what happened. If I look back, there was just suddenly an awareness of I'm not, yeah, it was just a relationship dynamic shift suddenly.
Mm. And then did you find that you were always a little on guard and waiting for that to come out of other people's mouths?
I can't say I was consciously waiting. But I think I also, in a way, just kind of like numbed it out in a sense. And then when it would come up again, just kind of like shoving it down, or like making, as I got older and I think a little bit more aware, either downplaying or making jokes about it, and kind of accepting those kind of like microaggressions, which is a term that didn't exist back then, at least in my vocabulary.
Right. So that's
Yeah.
something that naturally you swallowed and you're sort of like, oh, okay, they are who they are. And now there's a conversation about that, some microaggression and people understanding more. What's one that you can use as an example that people had no idea was really hurtful?
I'd say, someone I dated in high school, their mom at one point came to me and was like off to the side and said something about, well, but you guys will never be serious, or something like that, to that effect. It's a long time ago now. So um, and me having that thing of like, I wasn't sure if it was because I wasn't the same religion or if it was because I was Chinese. Like, what did she mean? And she could have meant both, for all I know. And I think that's one of those things where, oh, that's so subtle. That's in my mind. I was like, oh, that's that subtle prejudice or racism that's inherent. That I don't know if it's an aggression, microaggression, but
Well, she was basically telling you to go away.
Yeah. Or like, this is
You're a nice person.
You're not the right kind for me, right? You're for my son, right? Which I'm like, I wasn't going down that road. I'm in high school. I don't know. But and then I think more along the line later on is just everyone walking up, random people, not everyone, but people just coming up and randomly saying like ni hao, or and saying hi in Chinese without anything else. Like that, I can't even count the amount of times that's happened.
And did you feel that they were saying that in an attempt to communicate with you or to insult you and belittle you?
I think it's always to communicate.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that communication felt aggressive towards you?
It felt like, why would, like, the inner dialogue, like, why would that be the first thing you would say to me? Why would you just assume that I, one, speak that language? Because there's a plethora of Asian languages, and you just, I don't know, like, for me, it's, where else is that happening besides because of what I look like? Where else is someone else making that decision to go, you know what, I'm just going to go speak a foreign language to her?
Thinking that you weren't American?
Exactly. Yeah. The perpetual foreigner.
So did that make you feel that you don't belong?
I think for sure. I think it's taken time for me to even realize like the effects, again, kind of, in this conversation that's happened over this past year, the pandemic, and just this conversation of how much for myself, like, did I internalize and not even be aware of like the stuffing down, and that feeling of not of being different or seen differently.
Do you think that with what happened through the movement of Stop Asian Hate, it actually brought to the forefront within the communities of people who are Asian coming together more so, rather than that's the way it is here, we discuss and talk about it, but we get on with doing very well in this culture and in this society?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a lot of dialogue now, and especially with, one of the pros of social media is that it's allowed, I think, more people to actually talk about their experiences and give them space, and even things where it was like how to talk to your elderly, Asian parents about this. And there's also generationally, I think there's this younger generation that is more open and apt to honor, like, what are feelings? How does this make me feel? Where that was never discussed in my family, and definitely not on my parents' family, but it's opened up like even dialogue for myself with my parents, to ask them, well, what really was their experience, and get to know them, or how were they feeling about things, and
And what were their answers to these questions?
I think a lot of it was kind of like this downplaying of really, again, their experiences. And so I think, with, I think I asked my dad, like, if he had experienced any, discrimination, and again, very, very small small answer, minimal answer, but the short answer is yes, but we had to keep going, right? What are we going to do? Like, and so their solution is to, do better, and that was what they did. And yeah, I think it's all of this, it comes to life, like, well, is that a big deal? And that was for me, myself, like so many years of like, well, how big of a deal is it? Right? How bad is it? I guess that's the whole point of it being micro. It's not.
Right, because there's, and this can be in, various cultural stigmas that have been shed to light, right? So if we want to shift from even before, where there was the Me Too movement that occurred, right? And ladies who went through the system where they knew that pretty much that's how people got ahead and that's what was going on and it's the way it was and there's no way we're going to have the same pay. And then the younger generation think that's not cool. You guys can now change it. And almost this sense of resentment that, well, we had to go through it. So stop talking about it. Get over it.
Mm-hmm.
We had to suffer, rather than, yes, thank you for taking this torch and speaking about it, because it's not fun to be living like that. It's not fun to, we'll take the stereotype, know that you're not going to get that job because you don't look a certain way, right? You're sitting there and you pretty much know you're more qualified or you're more apt for that position, but this person looks this way.
Yeah.
So they're going to get that particular position. And then acknowledging that. And then where has it been where you have interacted with people who had no idea that this was what was going on or felt inside, that were surprised by you maybe opening up and sharing and saying, well, actually, yes, it really is kind of hurtful that people start speaking to me in Chinese? As an example.
Yeah. I don't know if I've actually like had the conversations with a segment who hasn't like expressed kind of what I'm expressing. What's coming to me actually in that idea of like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, is like earlier in last year where I had a situation. I was in the grocery store parking lot and had someone throw, it was aggressive. They were in a car. They called me things that were racially motivated, swearing at me, and sexually motivated, sexual remarks as well. And having that moment where I wasn't sure if the person was going to back into me, like basically hit me with their car for me just doing nothing. So, and where I'm going with this, and I guess what's coming up is that it took me a bit to even like acknowledge that was like, my mind was like, well, that person's crazy. I didn't get involved. It's not that big of a deal. Right. And so it took me some time to kind of unravel that situation and go, oh, no, that was aggressive. That was racially, told to go back to your country. I think I posted something random on social, but it was like I was literally in like the biggest mask you could ever see, and sunglasses and a hat, and it's like, oh, I can't escape what I look like. It doesn't matter how much shit I have. Stuff I have on, I'm wearing. Like, I am who I like. This is what I wear. It's who I am. And so, again, I think in that, like, for myself, within myself being like, oh, it's not that big deal, to like, oh, no, it is. So maybe that conversation with myself, frankly.
Yeah, right. From rather than stuffing it down.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is. And then what is the deeper levels of prejudice that go towards an Asian female?
Oh my gosh, I think, well, obviously, like just sexual, ideals, fetishizing. Um,
How do you feel if someone refers to you as exotic?
it hasn't happened in a while, but I think over this time, I think those when I was younger, maybe.
Now you're like, thank you very much.
Right, I know, yeah. Exactly. You want a cat cow? Okay, I'll take it. No, but no, seriously though. I think again, in at least in the generation that I am, I think there's this shift between like some of those things that I played into along the way or thought I had to or supposed to. And then coming to like this authenticity thing of like, oh, that's not who I am. I don't want to be that. Or again, it's just not my essence. That's not my vibe, like whatever it is. But again, having to come to some like, oh yeah, I was perpetuating, but again, I didn't know I was perpetuating.
Right, right. So you've had through this awakenings about yourself and how you were actually following these social norms of basically being prejudiced towards yourself
Totally.
and sort of brushing it aside, or then participating in the system as maybe your elders were, because that was the system and we weren't going to be able to change it. There's no place for a conversation like that. We're here for all reasons and we get on with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And do you think that moving forward, it would be healthy to have both of those considered? We do move forward and get on with it, but we also need to have these conversations.
I think for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Because I know, at least in my own personal experience, to not talk about things, to stuff things that like that's not healthy for anyone, like in anything, like whatever's going on, right? So yeah, to be able to hold space for both, but also to know that like have this like not let that like hold me back, or like where can I learn from this, or how do I want to move forward? Because otherwise,
how have you dealt with over the last year the stress of this happening during the COVID global, almost never-ending continuation of its? We have the initial prejudice towards China, and now we have a strong variant, the Delta variant from the Delta in India, another element of individuals grouped as Asian that coping with this is it keeps having another wave of potential prejudice coming at you. How do you deal with that stress?
Well, I did start seeing a therapist over so I practice some self-care. I think also, staying grounded. I have a meditation practice, as that helps keep me, I think, connected.
And so, those who don't know, she does a practice that we happen to teach, which is 20 minutes twice a day. And how long have you been doing that now?
I don't know, 4 years, maybe 5.
4 years. What was the biggest?
And prior to that, I was meditating for years, but yeah. But I think
what did you notice was the biggest shift when you started regularly doing this technique 20 minutes twice a day?
I think sleep, like for sure. I think I was rested for years after starting. It sounds like it's been years, but we just kind of started recently again. But like, I would no longer like have nightmares or dreams, even not even necessarily nightmares, but dreams. Like I just I was just sleeping through the night. And I don't know if that was always the case, but I've always had kind of an active dream life and stuff. But once I started that, like that kind of went away. And I never realized how that afternoon one was such like having done it now for years, it's like a battery recharge. And it just is like, wow, I had no idea like my body was that depleted. And on days when I happen to miss it or, don't give myself that space or time, like I really feel it. Yeah. And it's just amazing to me that that 20 minutes can be like this, like, ooh, like it's so refreshing. It's crazy.
Right, and everyone associates deep breaths with being horizontal and sleeping, and that doing an afternoon practice, you didn't even know that your body was that fatigued.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and just imagine what is going on physiologically over time when we don't think that we're fatigued. And if you're curious about exactly what the practice is, there's a fabulous ebook, and Debbie's story is in it. It's called Vedic Meditation Stories. It's free if you have Amazon Kindle right now. You can download it as part of the whole deal from Amazon Prime, and you don't need a new device. And open it up and read as many pages as you can, because any proceeds go towards the nonprofit for our outreach programs. We'd like to thank Debbie for being here. If you've enjoyed our chat, or you want to help simply support someone doing a good nonprofit, please subscribe if you can. You're welcome to share it. Or if you see any other suggested videos that we have, just click on them and check them out. But thank you, Debbie, for joining us. We greatly appreciate your honesty and delighted that you're enjoying the meditation. And we'll see you all soon on the next Cosmic Chat.